All right, good evening, everyone. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Karis Circle. Karis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Karis Books, and Karis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We're very excited to be here tonight with this amazing Black feminist roundtable to celebrate Black feminist writing, the brand new book by Dr. Stephanie Y. Evans. This is a much needed practical guide to publishing academic books. And we know we have a really large online crowd. We imagine that many of y'all are academics from around the country wanting to learn more about how to improve your writing. And we're very glad to have a wonderful, warm crowd here in the space tonight. So, in the interest of time, I'm going to read truncated bios, but I have put the full bios for our online folks because these are five very accomplished people. So I do want you to read their whole bios. First, I'm going to introduce Dr. Stephanie Y. Evans. She's a professor of Black Women's Studies in the Institute for Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies, and affiliate faculty of Africana Studies at Georgia State University. She served 12 consecutive years as department chair at Georgia State University, Clark Atlanta University, and University of Florida. That's a lot. Professor Evans, yes, that's right. I do just want to shout out your books. She is the author of four books: Black Women in the Ivory Tower, 1850 to 1954, an intellectual history; Black Women's Yoga History, Memoirs of Inner Peace; Black Feminist Writing, a Practical Guide, which we are celebrating. She's also the co-editor of 5 books, including Black Women's Mental Health, Balancing Strength and Vulnerability. So you can find all of those through Karis. You can also go back and watch Black Women's Yoga History with Karis. It's on our YouTube channel. I want to next introduce Dr. Jamie Canty. Dr. Jamie is a humanities scholar and oral history scholar who amplifies marginalized voices in her research, teaching, and activist service. She's an intersectional humanities scholar activist with a focus on the experiences of Black women and Black queer persons living in or from the American South. In 2022, she was appointed as a board member of WGS South, working as the Black Indigenous Persons of Color Caucus Chair. Her current research chronicles the collective narrative of Southern Black, queer, lesbian, women, and gender nonconforming persons, uncovering how the American South, particularly the Christian Black South, shapes and molds their lived experiences. Her forthcoming manuscript, which we will be celebrating, Snapping Beans, Voices of a Black, Queer, Lesbian South, outlines the ways the South informs their intersectional identities. She is currently a professor at her alma mater, Clark Atlanta University. So welcome, Dr. Canty. Our next contributor is Rosalind Duff. She's an international educator, leader, and healer with over a decade of experience in urban education. Her research centers on Black women's liberatory practices and transformational pedagogy. She is a doctoral student of teaching and learning at Georgia State University, examining teaching and teacher education, developing a framework for critical contemplative pedagogy, and integration approach to educational equity, SEL, and academics. She was a featured guest on the Abolition Teaching Network's podcast, Teaching to Thrive. She's also authored My Freedom Framework, which is a chapter in the book Black Women Navigating Historically White Higher Education Institutions and the Journey Toward Liberation. She's also authored many other chapters. And she is a certified cognitive behavior-based compassion training instructor of secular meditation through Emory University's Center for Contemplative Science and Compassion-Based Ethics. So welcome to Rosalind Duff. Next is Parker Foster. Parker is a research associate with the Center for Policy Research and Evaluation at the NYU Metro Center. She conducts research on various projects related to educational equity. Additionally, Parker is currently a third-year doctoral student in Georgia State University's Educational Policy Studies program, utilizing qualitative research to explore the impact of race and gender on the education of young people with a focus on Black girls. Parker has a master's in educational policy studies from Teachers College, Columbia University, and a bachelor's from Howard University. Welcome, Parker. And finally, we have Keisha Braithwaite, PhD, MSCR. She is a counseling psychologist and fellow of the American Psychological Association. She is the Poussin Satcher Endowed Chair in Mental Health and Associate Director of the Satcher Health Leadership Institute at Morehouse School of Medicine. Also at Morehouse School of Medicine, Dr. Braithwaite is professor and director of research and scholarship for the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences and professor in the Department of Community Health and Preventative Medicine. Dr. Braithwaite is an adjunct professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at the School of Medicine of Emory University. She earned her undergraduate, master's, and doctoral degrees from Howard University. She also completed a postdoctoral fellowship at Johns Hopkins University in both the School of Medicine and School of Public Health. She has so many degrees that I'm going to just honor the fact that you are a learned person who has traveled well, written extensively, and has lived an incredible life already. So I encourage folks to check out her bio online. So I am going to encourage our folks who are online, if you want to ask a question, you can pop it in the chat at any time. And when the time comes, we'll speak it into the room. And for y'all who are here, when the time comes, just raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone to you because we want everyone to be able to hear you. But right now, I am going to kick it over to Dr. Stephanie Emmons so that we can get this party started. Welcome, y'all.
All right. Yay. Thank you, ER. Thank you, Charis Books. Thank you for all the book lovers who made this possible. This is truly a celebration. This is a celebration of my love for all of the people in this room, for all of the people in this book. And this is an opportunity for me to share all of my secrets, basically my secrets to writing and writing so often and writing in what I feel is a sustainable way is to surround myself with brilliant people. And I write in community. So Black Feminist Writing, a practical guide to publishing academic books, is really a love letter to my community, a love letter to all of the people who I have surrounded myself with, who have encouraged me, allowed me to share their space and time and energy and ideas and write collectively. So today we're going to have a roundtable discussion about each of these writers' processes and their takeaways from the book. So again, this is a love letter, so I have a lot of thank yous as I introduce this book. First, I want to say, of course, thank you to the love of my life, Curtis Bird. I know he's out there. We just celebrated 15 years of bliss. Yes. And when I begin to take myself a little bit too seriously or take my job and my work a little bit too seriously, I have the benefit of being in love with someone who's in love with me and allows me to be my full self and not get submerged in the writing process. I also want to begin to thank Professor Bracy, who this book is dedicated to, who's my dissertation advisor. And Professor Bracy was a fifth generation educator, and he allowed me to understand what it was to be a teacher. Like, we talk about being a professor, right? We profess a lot. Right? We profess all day, but he was truly an educator, a fifth generation educator who, also shout out to Howard University where he was, his mom and I, even though I did I spent 8 years at Clark Atlanta University. So we got, right. But it is this idea of understanding your intellectual lineage in a way that is grounded in rigor, but also rigor and accountability, but also in love and compassion and community. I have several sister scholar circles at Georgia State, Chair at the Table Network with Tracy Sharpley Whiting of Vanderbilt University. We just spent some time in London with the 100 Black Women Professors Now group in London. And so when I'm thinking about writing in community and writing specifically with Black women and Black women academics and professors, there's a group in London called 100 Black Women Professors Now. Because out of 23,000 faculty in the UK, there are less than 100. Right, there are 66. And so when I'm writing and writing this book about sharing the writing process and writing in community, I've written this book for Black feminist writers around the world. Association of Black Women Historians is also a group that nurtured me, ASALH, Association for the Study of African American Life and History, and of course, NWSA. I am a professor of Black women's studies. I say that purposefully because as an undergraduate at Cal State Long Beach, I was specifically told there was no such thing. You cannot study Black women for a career, right? And so my entire career, all of my degrees are invested in this idea that as Black women, we are worthy of study, right? And so I write about Black women, even though I engage Black womanist and feminist theory. I write and center the voices of Black women. And those were the professional organizations that poured into me that this book is a direct response to. So this book is about the idea of practice, writing as a practice. I am not the most prolific writer I know. I am not the best writer I know. I am not the most critical writer I know. There are so many Black feminist writers who I'm inspired by. But the reason why I'm so quote unquote productive is because I've learned that as an academic writer, I was not writing for tenure. My first book, Black Women in the Ivory Tower, was my tenure book. All of my books came after that because I was allowed to understand that the practice of writing was healing me. It was healing for me to be able to turn to books, to turn to literature reviews, which are not perfunctory. You don't just do a literature review and say, cite these 3 people who everybody knows and then go on. I really feel like, and the book, Black Women's Mental Health in particular, helped me understand that these voices were in my head. Right. And that book that I co-edited with Kanika Bell and Nasinga Burton really helped me understand that by reading, I was loving all the voices inside of my head, right? Loving all these Black women's voices. And so the practice of writing over time just kind of unfolded and unveiled itself as a practice. So in this book, I address 5 areas of practice, and these are the areas of stress. So as I progressed up the academic ladder and I got tenure and then I was full professor and this department chair and I had all this power, right? I was still suffering. And so these areas of practice for me started as areas of stress. So personal, professional, publishing, public, and political. These were all the areas of stress that I was experiencing that when I pulled them apart, my writing helped me to address, right? And that writing became a practice, how I developed my voice, how I situated my professional argument within the context, how I became comfortable with the process of academic publishing as a genre, which is different than any other kind of publishing, because it takes forever to publish a book, right? And so I'll stop there because I really want to engage in this discussion of what the writing process is in community, the Black feminist writing process. Of course, shout out to Beverly Guy Sheftall and Laura Portwood Stacer, who wrote the book proposal book. A lot of what I offer in here is, all the tools that I share with my students. And so books like the book proposal book will help you in your writing process. 3 of my students from Georgia State University, I invited to read the preliminary draft of this work. Raina Brown, who is not on the panel, but wave, Raina, hey, thank you so much. Who's currently working on her thesis, also getting ready for her law school. And we have 2 dissertating students, right? a former student who is now a faculty member, and a colleague who also provided a chapter in one of my books, in Black Women's Mental Health, right? And so collectively, we can begin to unpack this book as we create defining terms for our own Black feminist writing practice. So I have two questions, and then we'll get into the discussion. I have two questions that I will ask, and they'll have about 4 minutes each to illuminate what they got from the book. And the first question is, please identify 3 parts of the book you found most interesting or useful, and please include page numbers for these all 3, and just talk about 1 or 2. So essentially, what in the book stood out for you? What was new for you, and what do you want to shine a light on?
Yeah. So good evening, everyone. As Dr. Evans mentioned, my name is Parker. I use she, her pronouns. And before I answer your question, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to engage with your work, and the opportunity to engage in a community of Black women scholars. So, I appreciate you more than you know. Let's go ahead and get in. So I think the first thing that stood out to me, and for folks who have it, I grew up in church. So if you will, if you right, if you open your word and turn with me to page 70. But very seriously, this part of the book is categorized as voice, and it spoke to me so clearly because one of the things that I took from this was the necessity to find and create moments of stillness, to hear your voice and to put your voice to paper. So it's this question of who am I, and how does who I am come across in my writing, which I find to be so useful in everyday life, no matter what you're writing. Of course, the book is about academics, but and academic publishing, but I find this to be necessary in a lot of ways, is constantly asking this ever-evolving iterative question of who am I and how do I put who I am in my writing. That really touched me because, as I mentioned, I find that it's something you always have to come back to. There's a question of who am I that never is answered succinctly or finitely. So that part really stood out to me, just as a personal question. And I think that you spoke earlier about some of the folks in your life, personal and professional, who have guided you and who have laid the path for you. And this book speaks to that as well. On page 94 and 95, you talk about this idea of placing ideas in context. And this part stood out to me because a genius, prophet, wonderful foremother, Octavia Butler, said there's nothing new under the sun, but there are new suns, right? Which is to say that, like, you don't come up with ideas on your own, and there is a intellectual genealogy to which we must abide. And I think that this book encourages us to do that. And this part of the book really stood out to me because it lets me know that there are folks who have laid the groundwork. It lets me know that there are folks who have created a path for me, and they created a path for my thoughts. All I got to do is just follow. And so I think that part really touched me because it can feel very isolating. And this idea of writing and as a practice can feel sometimes draining. But if you know that there are folks out there who maybe you've never even met, but whose work touched you, who have helped guide you along, it helps you build the community, which I think is the third piece that I want to highlight on page 136, which is the emphasis on building and engaging with community. As you write, you talk a lot about Mary McLeod Bethune's Guide to Community Building. And I encourage folks, if you haven't read that part of the book or the book at all, to definitely look that part up and engage with it, because community is everything. There are folks here who are online and in person who are part of my community. And so, oh, amen. So I just, that, but those, but I think, community is so important. And community, you are part of a larger community. And so if you can find a way to write yourself into an intellectual genealogy, write yourself into a community and be in practice, it's going to be so incredibly helpful. So I thank you again for putting those prompts and those questions in the book. And I find them encouraging, and I hope y'all do too.
All right, now I'm a church girl as well, so I feel you. I also want to give honor to the wisdom in the room and thank Dr. Evans for making good on a promise that you gave me way before I ever was a grad student. You said that you would help me, and you have helped me beyond my wildest dreams. And so in that, I want to also thank you so much. Honor my grandmother. Today would have been her 90th birthday. So I just want to say it's just a special day in so many ways. So thank you for this. If I had to build on to what Parker just said, I did not understand the benefit of a academic genealogy until I read this book. I was knowing the work that I do is around Black women's well-being, and it bridges the work that you do into teacher education. But when I read this book, it was just like a cosmic moment for me to say, oh my goodness, I'm a part of this amazing network. Thank you. Network of Black women who've been writing for decades on their well-being and so many other subjects. So for me, this book, 4 things really stood out, and I'm going to talk about 2 of them. But is time consciousness. So being conscious and aware of your experience of time, and then time and this idea of Sankofic time, past, present, and future. If it's not there, it's not real, y'all. Okay. So you start in the preface with time, quoting your mentor, Dr. Bracy, and he said that the most important luxury we have on this planet is the time to think. And then you go in and say, reading Black women, and this is in the preface, reading Black women writers help me slow down. There's that time, enough to listen to my inner voice. Reading about other educators who recounted their writing process, I recognize that slowing down that time and making time to think is the key to doing the scholarly work that means so much to me. In that moment, I had to respond, and this is what came to me, and I thank the ancestors. I need time to think about writing. I need to think about writing time, and I need writing time to think. Cosmic, okay? You go back, amen. Thank you, y'all. Then you bring us back to time in chapter 3, in voice, personal practice. And this idea of time is infinite, and this is where you get the past, present, and the future. But it's regarded as a whole. And I just want you all to remember that this past, present, and future, you got to have all parts, and that's what makes it whole. And that speaks to something you said, that your work has always been about history, time, and healing. That's the wholeness, y'all. Come on, catch it. Right. She come on, catch it. She's throwing it. All right. So yes, that presence of that Afrocentric way of being in time really touched me. And again, it's being here in this space and time continuum with you is like I'm getting to be with a Toni Morrison, a Bell Hooks. I'm just saying that, yeah, but that's what it means. Because what else shows up in this is it's a timeliness book. It came right on time for me. I told you I was struggling. I was getting ready to, throw in the towel. And it was like I opened up the book and everything that I was thinking, I was like, how did Dr. Evans know? Because she be knowing. Okay. And so it was timeliness. And then also this book is timeless. It's a classic. So go and get it right now.
Right on time. Right. Oh, good evening, everybody. My name is Jamie Canty. I've known Dr. Evans since she was at Clark Atlanta University. I was her misfit grad student who gave her all kinds of fill in the blank. But what I appreciate about those times was that she gave me grace. She always extended grace to me, even when I didn't always extend it to myself. So I want to thank you publicly. I always thank you, but I want to thank you in this space for doing that. And even carrying me through my journey. I was not going to write a book until I sat in Dr. Evans' class. Well, not in class, in her office at Georgia State. And she said, "Oh yeah, you're writing a book." And I said, no, I'm not. She's like, "So if you were to write a book," like totally bypassed the part that I said no. Totally bypassed that part. So I want to thank you for always motivating me and always inspiring me. And when I opened the book and started reading it, I said, okay, Dr. Evans is still talking to me. I still feel like that moment where I sat in your office and again, you said, okay, you're not, okay, what are you writing on your next thing? Because I think what I love about your book is that it is like you said, a love letter to us. And it reminded me when life be lifing, that you always want to go back to that space of happiness and peace. And not to say, and I appreciate you naming this, it's not that you're saying that writing is always a happy, easy thing to do, but I appreciate you naming the fact that writing is supposed to be restorative. It's supposed to be in community. It's supposed to be something that helps you grow as a person. It becomes personal as much as it is communal. So I want to thank you for doing that because it definitely gave me the recharge that I needed in this point of my life, where I thought, okay, I wrote the book, I'm done, I'm gonna sit down. No. Now I said, okay, next project, right? So it recharged me to do that. And one of the things that I loved about this is that the text is a tool to help us, junior faculty, graduate, anyone picking up the book, that the stress comes with writing. And then, of course, you want to ensure that the writing comes from an authentic space. So even centering Black women and Black feminist works, Black feminist scholars, or centering Black women writing about Black women is coming from this authentic space in a way that I think in the academy we've been told not to do, because, it's not valuable or it doesn't have that kind of academic rigor. So thank you for naming those things and thank you for allowing us to have this tool in a way that we didn't have before. And also I love the fact that you made work not as a capitalist notion of labor, but as a labor of love. And so when I'm looking back and thinking about not only my writing process, but also my the book itself, I'm like, writing it's work. And I didn't understand what you meant by WERK until I read the book. I said, oh, now it makes sense why she says work, not work, right? And so I think that's like reframing how we view work, right? That work is not something that is just to get tenure, even though that's of course, what happens, or to get kind of these positions in the academy. It's also the work to sustain our communities, to give voice to our communities. So it's laboring, but it's also restorative. It's laboring, but it's also healing. It's laboring, but it's also necessary and can be fun at times. So thank you for reminding me of that. But one of the things, I don't know how much time I have, child, because I'm a talker. But one of the things that I loved about the major thing that I came from that is you named experiences and of Black women who write about Black women for Black women and those who take a Black feminist framework to their writing. I think that nobody talks about us enough, and I'm going to shut up. There we go. Okay, so what I love is that you name so many things, and just very quickly, well, one of the things, I'm just going to name one of the things, that again, often when you write about Black women for Black women, it's a method of resistance. You kind of infer that you do actually name that in your book, because we're in spaces where it's not necessarily, like you said, it's not glamorous. It's not something that is gonna, people really want to, quote unquote, talk about in the academy, but it's something that's necessary. And so for us to write about Black women, for Black women, centering Black feminist works, I think is a method of resistance that you named. And I appreciate you naming that. And I appreciate you affirming that, because in the academy, it can be siloed. Like you mentioned, Parker, it can be very siloed, where you feel like, I'm just doing this by myself. Nobody cares. I'm writing this book. Nobody cares. I'm writing this article. Nobody cares. But really what this book says is, no, someone cares. And so I thank you. So it was a big hug for me. So I want to appreciate you so much for that.
Stephanie, Dr. Evans, thank you so much. I just love how you have continued to build this wonderful community and have brought the students in, doctoral students, doctors to be, and junior faculty, because it's so important to be able to just share your thoughts and your experiences in order to empower others as you've empowered me. And I remember when I was just thinking about writing a book, as she mentioned, I created a section, or at least had a chapter in one of her books. And I was like, I want to write. I don't know what the title was going to be or what. And so she took the time to really help and problem solve with me. And so we came up with it together. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's so amazing that we are here together, mm-hmm. moving forward in a positive way. And then Imani Ahmad, Dr. Ahmad actually brought a copy of my book, which was a surprise. But it's called Black Women and Resilience, Power, Perseverance, and Public Health. And so it just helped me. To be frank, I was going through a very difficult time when I was writing it a couple years ago. And so the book itself was healing for me as well, Dr. Evans, and just gave me an opportunity to focus on really understanding certain aspects of how we make it through, regardless of what it may be. And so when I think about, as I was reading your book, it was so motivating for me, but a couple sections really stood out. And I want to call people's attention to chapter 6, community. Community, public practice, actually page 126. And the quote that resonated with me is, peer mentoring is an essential component of professional development. An example of this can be seen with the edited volume, Dear Department Chair, Letters from Black Women to the Next Generation of Academic Leaders. And this is so important because we have a responsibility to pass on our knowledge and for us to work in community with each other to truly understand how and why we should continue to write. If it's not us, if not us, who? Right. If not, then when? Right. So we have to be the ones who really take the leadership role and be at the forefront. And so I'm just glad that we're able to do that. And so that quote resonated with me. And a second one, chapter 6, community, page 127, beyond creating materials for community, much of the writing I've done has been in partnership with other scholars. And we have written in community with several non-governmental organizations. And I just want to say the power of partnership is so important. You can't do it. Well, I can't do it alone. I don't think any. So being able to have true partners and collaborators. One is here. Hi, Ron Jeanette, Dr. O'Bannon. She's from Spelman College. And so we're working on some stuff together. So again, and one of my mentees, Sharon Rachel, and she was also in Dr. Evans's class, one of her classes. And I guess what I'm trying to just allude to is it's so important to really build this network, this nexus of people in order for us to recognize and to move forward in a way that's going to positively create the kind of outcomes that we're looking for.
Yes.
I need to confess real quick. I feel like such a fraud because and this is not imposter syndrome or any of that. I just need to be honest with you all. I need you. Let me be very, very clear. I need you. I am here because I needed help to figure out life. I did not have a very close relationship with my mother or those people, the family, right? And so I saw a demonization of Black women that I internalized for so long. And writing through Black women's history, and not saying that all of the Black women in history were, perfect or any of that, but there's such a real rainbow of ideas in Black feminist thought that are so helpful so that we are not valorizing or reifying or, and there's so many of writers like Alexa Pauline Gumbs and Jennifer Nash and, currently writing, who are helping us understand that while we saying, oh, Black women's studies, say Barbara Smith said Black women's study, the purpose of Black women's studies is to save Black women's lives. Like, we understand there are limits to that, right? Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor is really critical in saying, like, we can't just do this identity politics in a way that erases some of the complexities that we need to address. But me, myself, and I personally understand that when I say Black women's writing, Black women's ideas saved my life, that's not hyperbole. That is to acknowledge that I was lost and at a loss, right, for life, because the roots of the things that should have created some stability for me mentally were not there. And I write to create community because that's what I need. So thank you. Okay. And I just love learning, right? Lifelong learning is so important to me because I write a lot. That doesn't mean I know a lot. It means I'm curious. And so I'm curious about you all and your writing. I learned so much from my students and so much from my colleagues. Please talk about your own research, writing, and publishing journey. What did you find in the book that affirmed what you already knew or practiced? And so, we often read and say, oh, I didn't think about that. This was my aha moment. This was a cosmic moment, right? What did you read and say, like, I knew that. I was doing it right. And use this as an opportunity to toot your own horn, to brag on yourself, and help us understand who you are as researchers and writers.
Wow. You sit up here talking about you feel like a fraud. I have a really hard time talking about myself. And my friends who are here know I don't ever talk about the things I do. So this is a challenge, but one that I welcome. I think this question of research and the things that I knew in the book and my work, as was mentioned earlier, I'm currently a doctoral student. Not quite dissertating yet, but your mouth to God's ears. We gonna make it. But a lot of the work that I do is with and in service to and in curiosity of Black girls. And I think very deeply about the things that matter to us. I include myself because my inner Black girl still is very much alive, despite the fact that I'm 30. She is very much alive. I heard that. Yeah. Right. And so, but so that's a lot of what my research is about. And I'm super curious also about the way that they exist in the face of the things that they must subvert. So you think about all of the isms, but beyond all of the isms, how do Black girls just be? I think I also look within those, folks call them margins, but Dr. Evans helped me come up with a term called middling. And it's not that we exist on the margins. It's, as Toni Morrison said, I drew the margins to the center, right? And I made folks come to me. And so I'm curious about these aspects of Black girls' lives that are also in the middle, which is to say, the inclusion of like sexual orientation, the importance of place. I'm originally from Atlanta, so looking at Southern Black folks is super critical to me. Looking at queer folks is super critical and personal to me. And so that's a lot of what my research is about. As far as my writing journey goes, I was recently published, is my very first single author. Thank y'all. I appreciate y'all. I was recently published in the Journal of African American Women and Girls in Education. It is a very dynamic journal. It's got some amazing folks. It's got some amazing issues, but that have come out. But I was recently published in it, and I wrote about using youth participatory action research because, as was mentioned, I'm also a researcher, lifelong nerd, and using YPAR with Black girls to help them combat misogynistic educational policies. And so that's, again, very much that middling piece that I constantly seek after and I'm constantly in service to. And this book really affirmed for me the things that I know, but the things that I still struggle with, which is time. You mentioned a lot about time. For me, time is something that I never feel like I have enough of. And the time to just sit is such a anti-capitalist thing for me that I find myself like spinning almost, where it's like, what am I about to do? I'm sitting here doing nothing. I got something I need to be doing. And it's like, actually, no, I don't. And I think that in my writing process, time is also challenging for me because I suffer from this idea of like perfectionism, procrastination, where it's like, damn, I really want to do this amazing thing, but like, I'm nervous to get started. What if it's not great? I'll just finish by saying my therapist and I talk a lot about the actual just doing of stuff. And I think a lot about Beyonce for my fellow Beehive members. I think, right. But I think about, and this might be controversial to say, but like, you have some things that are your I Am Sasha Fierce, which is maybe a little bit lower. And then you have things that are like your Renaissance, right? And it doesn't mean that the I Am Sasha Fierce is not good. There are people who go down for I Am Sasha Fierce, right? Me, absolutely not. But, and like I said, it's controversial, but it's people, that's their thing. And just because it's not the most perfect thing you've ever put out doesn't mean that somebody's not going to enjoy it. And so I struggle with that, but the book reminded me and affirmed for me that like, it's a practice and it's a continuous thing. So I say that to say thank you again. And I look forward to connecting with folks in the room and to doing the things that are written about in this work.
Well, thinking about this book and again about time and timeliness, when I think about the research that I'm doing, it's really, again, bridging what Dr. Evans has done in women and gender studies and Africana studies and bringing that into teacher education. And specifically, what I have been able to understand through her work is, and it's all throughout this, is spirituality in teacher education. And so I approach my research from that perspective. And one thing that you used to ask when I was in your class, you would ask, well, what is your working title for your dissertation? So I made today. So I made sure I brought that. So I understood the assignment. And so my working title is Remembering, and that's shout out to Dr. Cynthia B. Dillard, Remembering Black Women's Spirituality in Teacher Education, Bell Hooks' Fight for Freedom, Hope, and Wisdom. And so all of this, thank you so much. And I thank the ancestors and lifting up Bell Hooks as well. She's at the center of my work. We're both from Kentucky. Just look, little Black girls from Kentucky trying to write. That's all. That's all I'm trying to do. Make my mama proud, you know. And so I lock arms with you, Dr. Evans, and Dr. Dillard and Bell Hooks, and who Bell Hooks had locked arms with Toni Morrison in her dissertation. So that's where I said I see clearly. But my research, this idea of fight is something that your book reminded me that that's what I'm doing. I'm in a fight, but it's how do I fight? And I fight from this perspective of the fight's not fair because it's already won. Got the victory, right? And so as I was studying, okay, because when we fight, we win, okay? She stole that from my dissertation. Shout out to her. We talk all the time, girl. But seriously, while I was taking classes with Dr. Evans and looking at Black women's memoirs and looking from the perspective of teacher educators and spirituality and all these things, I started to notice that Black women write from their spirit. And that is one thing we use to resist the oppression in the academy. And so FIGHT stands for faith, because that's broad. Religion, spirituality, whatever, however you come at this. I is for identity, and Dr. Evans just spoke to that, knowing who she is, and I believe, Parker, you spoke to that as well, how we affirm our identities, and we affirm it through the networks of women that are around us. The G is for gratefulness, and this gratefulness is an idea. I'll use Bell Hooks as an example. She got her name from a grandmother. She was looking back to make sure, oh, I know who I am now to go forward, right? And so that's that time, right? Gratefulness. H is for heartfulness. We always talk about love, compassion. We're always doing the kind thing, even when people aren't being kind to us. We can still pull out of our bag love, and I appreciate that. And that love can look like, baby, fix your crown, get that thing out your teeth, you know. So that kind of love, you know. And the T is for truth telling. We're always gonna let you know. So that's my word.
Oh goodness, making sure. Okay, well, it's hard to follow those because I'm really excited to see the work that y'all do. I'm so excited. So this book spoke to Dr. Evanson's book spoke to me because of one quote. I'm just gonna read the quote. I forgot to read the quote from my last one. Hold on. On page 13, if you turn your Bibles to page 13. Writing is a common practice designed to create common unity about ideas, positions, or actions. I write to help build and sustain community. And I said, oh my gosh, yes, that's what I felt my work has always trying to be about, is trying to establish that community, not only among Black women, but Black queer women living in or from the American South. So my manuscript, my book, I'm sorry, published book. I got to stop, different language. My book is entitled Snapping Beans, Voices of a Black Queer Lesbian South. Yay, thank you. Just dropped this year, hot on the press. But one of the things that made me think about this, that this quote was so central to that book, was because it talked about this common practice. And for me, the common practice was the actual, I felt like a journalist. I felt like Ida B. Wells and well, because I felt like my job was to chronicle the lives of Southern Black, queer, lesbian, and gender nonconforming persons. And I'll tell you why I have that whole title. It was not supposed to be that long, but the Black feminist practice of allowing Black women to name themselves for themselves, and the Black feminist practice of inclusivity and how important that is in terms of, particularly in Black queer spaces. I said, I can't tell these women and persons who they are, nor am I going to limit their gender fluidity or gender nonconformity. So part of the reason why I included gender nonconforming is to be inclusive. So that's part of the reason. It's an acronym in the book. But for me, it was about this reporting, this common practice that I kind of took for granted a little bit. But then at the same time, it was an opportunity for me to speak and give voices to those who probably have conversations that probably wouldn't have happened any other way. And so that was one thing. So in the reporting, in this common unity, and that was the other part that stuck to me, was when I was chronicling, I called it a collective narrative, but I was like, oh, but she called it common unity. And I like that because there were certain experiences that regardless of how you exist in your queer actualization and like the quote unquote coming out narrative, it comes in a common thread. There's a common unity among queer lesbian folks living in or from the American South, this journey. And so this book chronicles the journey to queer actualization and coming out. So the common threads were silence, shame, condemnation, judgment, reconciliation, authenticity, and freedom. I forget myself. So the journey and even the ways in which, and that's going to be future work, right? I end the book with a Black queer lesbian South. Now I didn't go into too much detail in terms of what that means and what that looks like, because I want that to be my next project. Because I definitely want to make sure people understand that Black queer folks have existed, been here, always have been here, have not only existed, but thrived. So I want to get out of the narrative of this traumatic queer person and really see the fullness of that individual as not only, yes, there was hurting things from the Christian Black church and things of that sort, but there was also elements of our Blackness that we love. And there's ways in which we found ways to thrive and exist. So I feel like that quote allowed me to naming exactly what I was doing in the text. But the other thing, good thing I've stopped. Good timing. One more point. Also, the fact that you mentioned about many projects, particularly from Black women, being ancestral. And so I called this book a spiritual book. I felt like this was an ancestral piece. I actually had an ancestral reading before I did the book. And the ancestral reading was like, there are queer women who want to talk to you. And I said, wait a minute. What do you mean? Whether in my family or whether like just back people that my grandmother might have known. She was like, did your grandmother know somebody? And I said, I don't think so, but I don't know, right? Those queer ancestors, you never know. So when you mentioned things being ancestral, I thought it was just me. I was like, oh, that's just me. This is just my journey. But the fact that you named that, the fact that our work is ancestral and personal, and the fact that it goes to the gift of, you went to the gift, the lesson, and the work, the gift of the Black queer women who came before me. I look at people like Audre Lorde. I look at people like Cheryl Clark. I look at people like Barbara Smith. I look at all these people. Well, Barbara Smith's still living, looking at all of these people that came before me, and even those queer women who was not able to live in their truth and whatever that was. The lessons, of course, not only my experiences, but making this an autoethnographic piece. So putting myself in the work. And it came later when I was interviewing these women in persons where I was like, I got to put myself in alongside them, because how foolish of I would I be these women are vulnerable enough to share their stories with me. Who am I to not be alongside them? So I was very intentional about using the I and we and us in the text. So many times when you say we, I'm talking about me too, right? We and us. And also for the book for the next generation. So I want the next generation of Black queer scholars to come and say, I want to take this to another level. I want to bring this to not only Black women who I've come across that are studying this, but also those who want to study Black queerness in the South more. So yeah. Keep your gamer short.
I'm just taking it all in. It's so good. It's so good. It's so good. And it really actually aligns with what I wanted to talk about, which is in the book, in her book, the chapter 3 on voice, personal practice, actually page 65, she indicated finding your scholarly voice means being willing to follow your mind and wonder. The creative improvisational way of thinking can replace the pressure to produce publications and replace it with curiosity and wonder. And also, that makes writing a form of exploration and adventure. And this resonated with me because I, over the last several years, have really, I've been, okay, you're the assistant professor, then the associate professor, then full prep, you know, so a part of that has been making sure that I elevated the voice of others in my department. And not saying it wasn't good work, but I lost myself or didn't, I wasn't able to really elucidate what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it, which is focus on Black women, prevention strategies, interventions for us, etc. as a researcher. And so I've been doing that more or less, but I think reading the book or parts of the book has helped me. And also in conversation with Dr. Evans, it's helped me to feel more comfortable with writing research grants and other scholarly work that I feel more connected to, and that is really what I want to do, and I feel good about doing. I mean, I'm still struggling or still finding my way because you got to do what you got to do for promotion. But I am looking at ways to actualize this more. And part of reading this book has motivated me to continue to look at how I can write more of what I feel like I want to feel connected to and write about. And so I've been doing more of that. And so I just, again, want to thank you so much just for this book is really someone was joking when they said turn to the Bible, your page, but it really is like a Bible for us to understand, okay, this is what you need to do. This is how you do it. Okay, hymnal number 5. But I just thank you so much. And just your voice has been such a strong influence on me and others that I am connected with. And I just want to just continue to be a part of your circle. So thank you.
Thank you all so much for sharing. Thank you again. I'm going to turn it back over to ER for the Q&A for those online. Hello, those online, and for this amazing room. Can somebody take pictures? Can you all make sure to take some pictures? Because this is archivists. We got to have the archive because this is a moment. This is a moment. So
we'd love to start with folks who are in the room and remind our folks online that now's a great time to put questions in the chat. Does anybody want to kick us off? Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna start with you, and then we'll go back.
I have a comment just regarding what we've been discussing. So the book is mirrors exactly what we're taught in your class. I took your Black feminist thought class. Well, you know that, but I'm just telling everyone else. It's because in the book you talk about understanding the historical context of people in academia and Black women in academia. And that's what you taught me as well in terms of like applying for law school and looking at, because I hope to be a judge one day. So looking at Constance Baker and so forth and Thurgood Marshall. And I never knew to do that until I had the pleasure of being in your class. So you taught me, I guess the book allowed me to reflect on my time in your class and understanding that you taught me that you can find representation because you may be the first person in your family to have a doctorate degree, to go to medical school, but you can do some research and find out that you can do it as well. There are a network of Black women that have done it. So thank you for that. And that ties into the writing as a practice as well, because, you know, I'm just like, how am I going to do this? Like different things, you know, but understanding that just take one step at a time. So that was very influential, the book, and just getting the chance to um, be mentored by you has been the highlight of my life, of my graduate career. So I just want to say thank you. I'm sure that Dr. Bracy's legacy is truly in the book and everyone that gets to meet you, because it's certainly mirrored. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This is an excellent panel. Hello. A lot of very small points of connection. I went to Clark Atlanta. I teach at Howard. You probably don't remember me, Dr. Braithwaite. You probably don't remember me. I worked in Community Voices. I became pregnant with this baby girl here. It's 18 years later, so it's been a long time. I started my Black feminist work. I didn't know to name it that in public health. And so all the things. And then I went to academia mid-career. My question is, when you talk about timeliness, to do this work in this time, and what is some advice you have to be bold? Because we know there are sisters who've done this work, and I think I call it white supremacy, I'll call it the oppressor, I call it it's very hard to do this work in this time and to stay safe. And so what is some advice that you would give to writers who they know to do it, but when they do it, you know, there's a fear, and also there is also sometimes a potential of retaliation against the Black body. So I guess I would like to maybe add in another timeliness point, that to do it in this time really costs a lot. So what would be your advice? Anyone can answer.
If you would turn your hymnal to page 150. No, there are no safe spaces for Black women. I've never experienced a safe space where I felt whole or seen or safe or valued or centered. I don't know how much time I have left. I never have. I did not grow up safe. So I was very familiar with the fact that academe is a hostile environment, a violent environment. It was not built by or for us. That said, that's why I spent the first 10 years of my career studying the first 100 years of Black women in higher education. So everything we're experiencing now was experienced and written down in Black Women in the Ivory Tower. The only reason why I'm a success is because I studied Anna Julia Cooper, Mary McLeod Bethune, Fanny Jackson Compton, and Septima Clark. Those were the 4 women that I studied for my dissertation that allowed me to understand academia is hostile, the world is hostile, it's not made for us, but we can find joy, we can make change. And so on page 158, I say these are our challenges: laws, leadership, literacy, and labor. This is what we're facing, right? None of this is new. And so again, Bracy worked for 52 years at UMass Amherst. And when things were great, when things were horrible, when things were deadly, when things were violent, when we've got global warfare, when we've got genocide, when we've got gun violence, when we've got unchecked, the blah, 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 yak, 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 yak. It ain't gonna change, right? We are here to do our work. Work, W-E-R-K, work it, make it magic, make your life what you now is all we have. This time right now it's our time. It's our time to do the work that our foremothers did to make it so that we can be in this room. So there is no safe place. There's no safe place. There are the places that we make there are the places that we can make as safe as we can. But yes, it's a trying time. Stay focused. Focus is a Black feminist practice.
with what Dr. Evans indicated. I have a slightly different perspective because I've been at Morehouse School of Medicine for 18 years, and I never imagined that I would be at one place for so long. But at Morehouse School of Medicine, as you know, I'm sure, we had the first Black woman president of Morehouse School of Medicine. And that creates an environment which for me it makes me feel good to know. I mean, there's still politics no matter where you go, but at least seeing that is empowering to some extent. And talking with Dr. Montgomery Rice is empowering to some extent. She actually wrote the foreword to my book because she understands that we as Black women have a specific or unique experience in America, or really globally. But you know, I would say that it's important to have people around you, like how we're here with each other tonight, having a circle of people who you can feel comfortable going to and talking and voicing your concerns or issues, etc. And it's also important to find a mentor or mentoring team that's going to be there to help empower you to get to a point where you know, you can bring in your own money, so to speak, or you don't have to rely excuse me. Okay. I couldn't say something. Okay. So the other thing I just want to say for everyone, we have to make sure that we practice self-care or self-compassion to ourselves so that we don't slip, so to speak, and that we have ourselves and our community of sisters and brothers, you know, whatever it may be, whoever your circle of people who are supportive of you are. And that's important, you know, because so often as Black women, we keep lowering ourselves on the list and take care of other people. And so we got to make sure that we take care of ourselves.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the panel. My name is Nia Mitchell, and this event was right on time because I'm writing my dissertation and I'm struggling. I'm also an alum of Georgia State and Morehouse School of Medicine. But I had a question about the publishing side of writing and kind of navigating those publishing houses and editors. Like if you had any guidance or recommendations, particularly, I'm unsure if I want a faculty position. So doing that outside of academia potentially, or inside as well. Thank you.
Okay. And this is again one of the reasons why I wrote the book, and why please do visit professorevans.net. There's a lot of resources on that site. And shout out to Aisha Turman, who years ago said, it's great that you're doing well, but what are you doing for other people? And so all of the lessons that I have are on the website. And this is, again, why I wrote the book. So page 116 and page 146 talk about the difference in publishing a single author book and a co-edited book, right? And so there's a you know, choosing the best fit for you, deciding who your audience is. You know, there's a lot of things that go into that process. But the one resource I would offer is Laura Portwood Stacer's The Book Proposal book. That book, even though I had written several books, really acts as a de facto developmental editor, because it helps you ask the questions about your content, your structure, and sources. I know some of y'all remember that. Remember content, structures, and sources, and your audience, your community, right? All of those answers to the questions will help guide you to the press that's the best fit. and this is again where I shout out SUNY Press, State University Press, New York, Rebecca Colesworthy, who was the person who just got so sick and tired of me with these books. She said, why don't you develop a series, in Black women's wellness? Because I said, I want a whole library of books on Black women's wellness. So the book proposal book will help you answer. There's a list of 20 questions, and those 20 questions will guide you to the right press. And then there's some other tips in here about your, understanding the process, because as a new author, you're anxious, right? You think you're anxious with your dissertation committee, but there's a lot of anxiety. The reason why I was able to continue publishing is because I was able to anticipate these are the steps and not take things personally. Like Reviewer A, shout out to Reviewer A on this book, who sent me a 10-page single-spaced response telling me how this was trash. And she said, or they said, I don't even know who it was, right? Because there's an integrity that needs to happen, right? So whoever this person was said, I really wanted to like this book. And that's why you want to go with a press that has an integrity in reader review, so that whoever that person is can be honest. It's not there yet, sweetie pie. Fix your crown, because it's not there yet. So regardless of whether you write for an academic press, understanding the critical assessment that's needed for peer review will also help you finish your dissertation. Not everybody who tells you yes is your friend. Not everybody who tells you no is your enemy, right? Because So there's resources in the book, but the book proposal book by Laura Portwood Stacer will get you started. Do we have we got questions online? No. Last question or last comment? See her. She's got an answer for you after.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Evans, for this wonderful book, and thank you to the entire panel for writing us into the past, present, and future. My name is Liz London. I'm a second year at Emory, PhD student in the AFM department, studying. I'm made it to my second year. And I'm sitting with my cohort member, Monique. And I wanted to ask about the notion of experiential study. You talk about how your interest in wine and research in wine turned into, your research in tea, and then you found yoga. But I find that all to be super, it's generative for me, because I find myself feeling really contained. There's a lot inside of me that I feel like I need to get on paper, but I can't find the right avenue in terms of my body to get it out. And I'm also realizing that I'm from New York, and I miss being around Black women who gather around plays and they do all these different things. And the scene is just a little bit different in Atlanta. And so, right. And so as I sit with my own community, including Parker and my sis Leah, who's also a writer, London native, she self-published her book, period. Could you just talk a little bit about experiential study and the importance of getting into the body, getting into space and place, and just thinking about experience aside from, inclusive of wellness and everything else that comes with that?
Thank you for that question. So I had the luxury of, after earning tenure, the luxury to explore and just sit still and follow where my mind went. And so I'll say that it's important to honor this understanding that you have to listen to your voice. You have to ask the questions that the ancestors send to you, or that, centering your interests and centering your experiences. But you have to do a vibe check with history, because I began to ask questions about Black women's wellness. So I started with Black women's intellectual history, looking at someone like Anna Julia Cooper, who was a foremother of what we now call intersectionality. As I began to stress out in this living the life of the mind, I began to ask, how did Anna Julia Cooper live to be 105 and a half, right? What were her wellness practices? So even though I grounded my work in experience, right, that's not enough. That academic writing, and it's not about necessarily, the number of citations that you have or what. It's a process of understanding that you have to do more than just say, this is what I think or feel. Right? This is what's important to me. But when you do that, when you actually embrace research and begin and pull yourself to the margin and center yourself, you'll find all the other suns everywhere. I asked the question about stress management and looked at the American Psychological Association stress study of 2017. And in that, they said the practices are meditation, yoga, music, prayer, and exercise. Those are the ways that we manage stress now. So I went back to Black Women's Memoirs, the database that I created, and asked those questions about meditation, music, prayer, yoga, and exercise. And it was happening upon Rosa Parks as not only taking yoga, but teaching yoga, that led me to say, okay, I'm going to write, because I was doing yoga, I was doing meditation. But the researcher is, like, what makes you different than, why are you getting this PhD when you can just write what you want to write? You don't need this, right? Mm-hmm. But what makes it different is the process that you're accountable and responsible to history, to contemporary scholarship, to processes. And that doesn't mean that the writing has to come out boring or, kind of sanitary, like some academic writing can be, right? But that you have honored the process of investigation, even if you hide all of the boring stuff in the footnotes, right? But you can center yourself, you can center your experience, you can center your curiosity. But the process means that you have to also do the research in ways that are recognizable to other scholars.
Yes.
Our last question will be from Nikki online. Nikki says, I'm a doctoral student and in my 50s. I am not interested in pursuing tenure, but interested in continuing to research and do scholarly work. Do you have advice for Black feminist writers who may not have the backing of an academic institution?
Yes, excellent question. Write, read. And develop your own community. As I said, like, I'm writing in this way because this is what I need to feel whole, to feel connected, to feel sane. And so it's not about tenure or promotion or, any of those things. The sister circles, the writing circles really are about, accountability, shared experience, shared knowledge. And so it's developing your peer review circle, your writing circle, that has really little to do with the academic professional structure of promotion. And so the more you read, the more you write, the more you create in community, the more you expose yourself to critical peer review, and understand, Anna Julia Cooper lived to be 105 and a half. Lifelong learning means that there is no stopping point, that I keep writing because I have more questions, because I need to know more. It has little to do with the academic tenure and promotion structure. And sometimes, less to do with, my colleagues who, may or may not recognize what I'm doing, right? I'm not doing it for any other people. I'm doing it for myself and my community. So as an elder writer, right, that's what you just getting into the sweet spot. I just turned 55. I'm like, oh, I'm ready to do something now. Like, I've learned some things. I know some things, right? And so it's about it. And the more, I will say this has been so enjoyable for me, because it's about this common unity, that I'm not writing in isolation. Academic structures really, almost damn near determined that they're individualist, that you produce, that you're accountable, that, all these different things. But this is what it's about for me. This is about, the community of lifelong learners.
I think that's a beautiful place to wrap up. Thank you all so much. We want to encourage our online friends. I dropped the link to the book proposal book. So if that is a reference that folks would like to take advantage of, do that. But most importantly, you can click the teal button at the bottom center of the screen to buy Black Feminist Writing, a practical guide to publishing academic books from Charis Books and More. We really do appreciate it when you buy your books from us. We want to let everyone know that this will be up on our YouTube channel in just a couple of days. So if you have colleagues, students, peers that you want to share this with, that you really wish were in the room with you tonight, please just go to youtube.com/Charis Circle, and you'll be able to access the video, plus our entire catalog of videos that we made since the pandemic began. So including Dr. Evans' book about yoga, where you can learn all about Rosa Parks' history of yoga and everything else. So if that sparked your interest tonight and somehow you missed it, check that out. So we're going to say goodnight to our virtual friends. Thank